1 million people lived here, then it vanished. Where did Merv go? We walk through modern megacities like Tokyo, London or New York, assuming their global dominance is an immutable law of geography. Yet the soil beneath our feet is a crowded graveyard of eternal capitals that simply ceased to exist. The true vulnerability of these legendary ancient hubs was never a lack of thick stone walls, massive standing armies or endless vaults of gold, but rather the fragile, highly centralized decisions of single rulers, who believed their empires were too grand to ever fall. By tracing the final catastrophic choices made within 3 of the ancient world's most magnificent lost capitals, we uncover the chilling reality of how quickly the beating heart of human civilization can turn into a silent field of broken pottery and dust. The standard textbook narrative of Merv's sudden fall blames the unstoppable, mindless savagery of the Mongol hordes, but the true catalyst of its ruin was a series of disastrous diplomatic betrayals orchestrated by the Khwarezmian ruling elite, who fundamentally misunderstood the nature of the nomadic empire rising to their east. Years before the first Mongol horsemen appeared on the horizon, the local governors of Merv, blinded by their own immense wealth and secure behind their triple-walled oasis, repeatedly executed peaceful Mongol trade caravans and shaved the beards of the ambassadors sent by Genghis Khan to establish trade. This arrogant stance fractured the delicate geopolitical balance of the Silk Road, turning what could have been a highly lucrative commercial partnership into an existential blood feud that the nomadic forces were determined to settle with absolute finality. The wealthy citizens of Merv believed their city was protected by its geographic isolation in the heart of the Karakum Desert, ignoring the reality that their own Sultan, Ala ad-Din Muhammad, had already fled the empire in cowardice, leaving them leaderless and utterly exposed to the coming storm. As the Mongol army approached, the city's defense collapsed, not from external bombardment, but from internal betrayal, as rival religious and ethnic factions within Merv actively sabotaged each other's defensive sectors, in a desperate short-sighted bid to win favor with the invaders. They opened the outer gates themselves, foolishly hoping the Mongols would slaughter their domestic rivals while sparing their own neighborhoods, unaware that nomadic warfare recognized no such local distinctions. When Tului Khan finally entered the city, he did not immediately order a massacre. Instead, he requested a golden throne to be placed on the central plain outside the walls, and quietly asked for a complete census of the city's wealthiest merchants, scholars, and library keepers. This census was not for taxation, but for a meticulously planned psychological execution, designed to systematically strip the city of its leadership, memory and wealth, before the physical destruction even began. Tului forced the wealthy elite to watch as his soldiers systematically excavated the city's legendary libraries, burning over 150,000 priceless manuscripts, works of algebra, poetry and medicine, just to use the ashes as bedding for their warhorses. The Mongols understood that to truly destroy a global capital, they had to erase its intellectual infrastructure, ensuring that Merv could never again rise as a rival center of Islamic science, astronomy and literature. For 12 days the executioners worked in shifts, dividing the population into groups of hundreds and assigning them to individual soldiers with a quota of slaughter that remains unparalleled in pre-modern warfare. Only 400 skilled artisans and young children survived the bloodbath, forced to march across the desert as slave labor to build new capitals for their conquerors in the east. The conquerors systematically dammed and diverted the grand canals that had fed the oasis for 1,000 years, turning the lush gardens of Merv into a dry, salt-crusted wasteland within a single season, ensuring the desert would reclaim the city. Yet the ultimate mystery of Merv's disappearance lies not in the bones buried beneath the sand, but in the fate of the secret treasury that Sultan Sanjar had hidden deep within his monumental mausoleum, a vault whose entrance he sealed with a mechanism that no modern archaeologist has ever been able to locate. But while Merv was swallowed by the sand, another global capital half a world away would meet its end, not through siege, but through a single arrogant decision made on a battlefield of elephants. In January 1565, the 80-year-old regent Rama Raya of the Vijayanagara Empire sat upon a magnificent golden palanquin, surveying a battlefield near Talikota, where his army of over 100,000 infantry, cavalry and war elephants stood ready to crush a coalition of neighboring sultanates. Vijayanagara was the undisputed capital of southern India, a metropolis of unimaginable wealth, where diamonds were sold by the bushel in open-air markets, and the royal palaces were clad in sheets of polished brass that reflected the tropical sun. Rama Raya, supreme in his military dominance and arrogant from decades of unchallenged victories, made the fateful decision to lead the vanguard personally, dismissing the warnings of his closest generals that his physical presence on the front lines made him an incredibly vulnerable target. He believed his sheer prestige and the terrifying sight of his royal war elephants would cause the enemy forces to flee in terror before the battle even began, securing his legacy as the ultimate protector of the empire. The battle turned instantly when two of his key Muslim commanders, who led the imperial vanguard's artillery divisions, suddenly turned their cannons on their own ranks, having accepted secret bribes from the allied sultans before the campaign. In the resulting chaos and smoke, enemy cavalry surrounded Rama Raya's golden palanquin, dragging the aged emperor from his seat within minutes, to stand before the enemy sultan. Before his royal guards could even launch a counterattack, the enemy commander executed Rama Raya on the spot, and paraded the news of his death before the entire imperial army. The sight of their emperor's head on a spear caused an immediate, total panic, and the massive imperial army, which had never prepared for a scenario without its supreme commander, disintegrated into a chaotic retreat back toward the capital. This was not just a military defeat, it was the psychological decapitation of an entire civilization that had centered its identity entirely around the semi-divine status of its ruler, causing a total collapse of authority. When the retreating soldiers reached Vijayanagara, they did not attempt to defend the massive stone walls. Instead, the royal family gathered 3,000 elephants, loaded them with the crown jewels, gold and treasury, and abandoned the city's 500,000 citizens to their fate. The capital stood completely undefended, a vast, wealthy metropolis, waiting for the conquerors to arrive and claim its riches. For 5 months the victorious Allied armies systematically looted and destroyed the city, burning the wooden palaces, smashing the stone temples, and breaking the intricate irrigation networks that kept the city alive. The destruction was so thorough that the metropolis was never reoccupied, leaving its grand monuments to the jungle, turning a global trade hub into a silent wilderness of ruins. The speed of Vijayanagara's collapse reveals how the concentration of absolute power in a single individual makes even the wealthiest empire incredibly fragile, leaving behind a ghost city that remains frozen in time. Yet while Vijayanagara's ruin was caused by a single battlefield betrayal, the next lost capital of ANI would fall because of a secret deal signed behind closed doors, far from any battlefield, leaving its gates wide open to the enemy. In 1064, Alp Arslan, the Sultan of the Seljuk Empire, stood before the double walls of ANI, the magnificent capital of Bagratid Armenia, known as the City of 1,001 Churches. The city was a masterpiece of medieval architecture, protected by deep river gorges and massive volcanic stone walls that had withstood dozens of sieges from the greatest empires of the East. Yet the real cause of ANI's fall was not the Seljuk siege engines, but a secret treaty signed years earlier by the Byzantine Emperor Constantine IX Monomachos, who had forced the Armenian king to cede the city, in exchange for safety that never arrived. The Byzantine administration, having annexed the city, dismantled the local Armenian thematic army to save money, leaving the defenses in the hands of underpaid mercenaries, who had no loyalty to the city or its people. When Alp Arslan launched his assault, the mercenary defenders abandoned their posts on the walls to plunder the city's treasury before the enemy could, leaving the gates completely unguarded. The Seljuks walked through the open gates of the world's most heavily fortified city, without facing any organized resistance, initiating a plunder that ended its golden age forever. The fall of ANI was not a failure of engineering or courage, but a failure of trust. The empire that promised protection had systematically disarmed the very people who had the greatest motivation to defend their home. Over the centuries, earthquakes and shifting trade routes finalized what human betrayal had started, turning a bustling metropolis of over 100,000 citizens into a haunting, empty landscape of abandoned cathedrals, standing alone on a windswept plateau. This leaves us with an unsettling paradox. The very systems of centralized power and wealth that allow a global capital to rise are often the exact mechanisms that guarantee its absolute, irreversible erasure. As we look at the ruins of Merv, Vijayanagara, and ANI, we are left to wonder if our own modern megacities are truly permanent, or if they are simply waiting for their own single, catastrophic decision to turn them into the next forgotten legends of the earth. As you think of Mujir al-Mulk's turban floating in the dry moat of Merv, ask yourself, is the ultimate survival of a civilization determined by its physical strength, or does it depend entirely on the fragile character of those who hold its keys?